Mark Yusko might have just said the quiet part out loud that every XRP holder must listen to. We're going to get to that here in a moment, but let's start off with a few things. Let's start off with the big update on the 9th that we got from Wrath of Kahneman. Now here we have Ripple received a provisional trust bank charter. Now, I recently just talked about this in a video regarding the Federal Reserve integration. On Friday, the CFTC clarified which stablecoin issuance would fulfill the no action position, the original defined as a payment stablecoin as a USD stable issued by a state regulated MT or trust company. Now, the reissued version adds national trust banks to that list. That's right. That means that Ripple could be on that list as well. Now, this is all, of course, before the Genius Act. It's confirmation that the Ripple subsidiary bank could issue RLUSD with confidence. And this is all from the OCC. Now, when we think about this as well, we go over here. Again, I included this in a recent video because this is that update from the OCC. And it's regarding companies like Ripple becoming a bank because of this open door from the OCC. Now, if we're thinking about Ripple becoming a bank, what's the next major, push here from Ripple? Well, we're going to get there, but I believe that this is all strategic. And again, Mark Yusko also believes the same exact thing, which again, we'll expose in this video. Now, I said over here, these tech companies are becoming banks. That's not a quote from me. That's actually a quote from the OCC. And then we also look at a quote from a Ripple employee, Luke Judges, which is, a bank called Ripple. Very interesting news coming from the Forbes regarding the OCC supporting innovation. One thing comes to mind, Ripple becoming a bank. Don't forget the bio from Luke Judges. Now, again, we've talked about and we've pretty much addressed Ripple becoming a bank for years. I mean, this has been something that we've speculated on for a very, very long time because it's essentially what's happening. I mean, if you look at the Ripple stack, it looks as though it's banking infrastructure, not just your typical digital asset infrastructure. Now, to build on top of this, we go over here because again, this is all based around their stablecoin as well, RLUSD. Here we have XRP stablecoin had an explosive first year of growth, even compared to industry leader USDC. This is from CoinGecko, the source is, but 21 shares posted this. Now, if we're looking at USDC and RLUSD from the launch period, again, we already know how big USDC is today. RLUSD is blowing it out of the water. I mean, we're talking about an 1,800% gain already in the first year of growth for RLUSD. Now, when we think about that as well, we go over here to RLUSD and it's continuously growing. $1.5 billion, up almost 10% in the last 30 days. The holders, the monthly transfer volume, everything is up in a big way. This is just the starting point for RLUSD. But again, when we think about what's happening here, what's the big picture? Well, let's go over here. So this is from BitGo. Now, again, we go back to the whole idea of Ripple becoming a bank. Now, BitGo was also one of the key players that received conditional approval. They got full approval of their National Trust Bank Charter license. But here we have at face value, an insured bank sounds safer than an uninsured bank, referring to FDIC insurance. But what's better than an insured bank is a 100% reserve bank. Like BitGo, we don't need FDIC insurance because unlike your insured bank, we don't lend out your assets. And of course, we do maintain one of the largest commercial insurance policies in all of crypto. It's time to rethink what banks really are. Now, this is very interesting because again, they got approved for their charter license at the same exact time that Ripple also got their approval. So if BitGo, this is the CEO, if the CEO of BitGo is claiming, hey, BitGo is now a bank, wouldn't that essentially mean that Ripple is also becoming a bank? Then we go over here. Big shout out to Anderson for this. We have new XRP ledger amendments position the XRP ledger to become a main cornerstone of the new financial system. Again, if we're thinking about what Ripple is building, they essentially have a full-on banking infrastructure where XRP is a key piece of that. But how are they using XRP? What's the whole core use here for XRP? Well, then you look at the utility here that XRP provides through all of the features that are going live on the XRP ledger. We start off with the use case, stablecoin payments, FX, and remittances. XRP's utility here is auto bridging, fee burn, reserve requirements, settlement, and liquidity provision. XRP will be that bridge asset. Then we look at tokenized collateral, network usage, object reserves, lending and credit, borrowing, lending asset, protocol fees, compliance, governance, reserve box. Like XRP is becoming more intertwined in institutional finance, either as the asset being moved, the bridge facilitating exchange, or the reserve currency backing network security. Again, if we're thinking about Ripple becoming a bank, XRP will be the power behind that bank. This is where we start to see the huge picture unfold. But it gets even crazier than that. Again, we go over here from Anderson. Now the Ripple Treasury arrived, powered by G Treasury, along with Ripple receiving a conditional approval for the National Trust Bank Charter. It's time to update my graphic on the behemoth Ripple is becoming. For all my graphics, follow me on IG, and you guys can go follow him on IG. But if we're looking at this image, we go to Ripple Custody. We go and look at all of these things. The key thing here that we're looking at that almost everyone is kind of just overlooking is CBDCs. Why am I bringing up CBDCs? Right? CBDCs are bad, right? And yeah, CBDCs definitely are bad, but they are happening. And is Ripple and XRP playing a key role in that? Well, let's go over here. This is from Mark Yusko. Now, this got posted from Zave Crypto. Mark Yusko says he's watching for a potential policy curveball. According to him, XRP activity may be happening quietly behind the scenes. Something significant appears to be developing for XRP. Check this out.
I worry there's a curveball coming, and maybe it's an XRP thing, and he's doing more behind the scenes than I know. I worry that there's a CBDC version coming where they just say, you know what, you can't use Tether, you can't use USDC, and if you don't use the government, we're going to put you in jail. Kind of like the 33 Act with gold. I worry there's a curveball coming, and maybe it's an XRP thing, and he's doing more behind the scenes than I know. I worry that there's a CBDC version coming where they just say, you know what, you can't use Tether, you can't use USDC, and if you don't use the government, we're going to put you in jail. Kind of like the 33 Act with gold.
So he believes that what Ripple is creating here with ROUSD and what they're creating around XRP, it could essentially be a closed off system where you are forced to use ROUSD, use Ripple, use XRP, and this is all from the government. Now, what's even more interesting about this is if we go all the way over here, this goes all the way back to 2025. This got posted from Good Evening Crypto. He's bringing this back up because, again, this is from Mark Yusko. He was talking about this back in 2025. There is some talk that XRP could be utilized and or ordered to be used for a central bank digital currency or as the base layer for national banking. Ordered to be used as a CBDC or the CBDC layer. I go all the way back over here because, again, when we are looking at what XRP is becoming through all of these major amendments, this is an institutional permissioned stack, essentially. Because you now have those permission domains, you have all of the permissioning, and then you also have the permissionless side too. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. But when we think about this, yeah, I mean, XRP could be that stack for something like this that, it could be scary to think of, but it's also even crazier to think that, all of this and everything that's been happening around XRP and around Ripple for years, a lot of this definitely seems planned. And we talked about that even with the SEC lawsuit, but check this out.
The one piece of legislation that is likely to happen, the other stuff, there's a lot of talk that they'll expand beyond just Bitcoin to now, XRP and Cardano and Hedera. And look, those founders have been buddying up to the administration and to Eric, and I think Eric's driving a lot of this, his son. So we'll see. But the case for the strategic Bitcoin reserve, because Bitcoin is digital gold, everything else has different roles. Something that could happen, I don't know if it'll happen the first 100 days, Abs, but there's some talk. This will make the XRP people really happy. There is some talk that XRP could be utilized and or ordered to be used for a central bank digital currency or as the base layer for national banking. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but that's one that if that does happen, that changes things. It's kind of like...
Now, he did let something slip there, which was it could either be the base layer for a CBDC or national banking. Now, we already know that Ripple is getting very close to being fully integrated into the US system. And we already know that in the US, we have the term CBDC banned. Back in the summer of 2025, the term CBDC essentially got banned. Now, I've always stated that although, yeah, we won't get a CBDC, we will most likely get a stablecoin. Now, I've mentioned that in the past, stablecoins and CBDCs are essentially, the same exact thing. They're just issued by a different player instead of a central bank. It's a private entity. They're still programmable. They're still controllable, etc. But we think about this and we go back to RLUSD and how, RLUSD has been growing. If we're thinking about stablecoins, just recently, Scott Bessent, big shout out to Subjective Views, he basically said that the Genius Act and stablecoins could be an important feature of financing the US government. This has been overlooked by so many people, but I've been mentioning recently that RLUSD is essentially becoming a weapon of the United States. Stablecoins are becoming those weapons, but it's not just any stablecoin. I don't think that's going to be Tether. We already know that Tether had to make USAT, which is essentially a new stablecoin just to, be compliant in the US. And Circle, a lot of people have speculated in the past that, Circle doesn't really have a strong enough balance sheet, but Ripple does. And even Brad Garlinghouse has stated this many times over. If we're thinking about what could become the weapon of the United States, it would essentially be RLUSD. But if we're thinking about that, then XRP could become that base layer for national banking or even for a potential CBDC. In this case, it would be a stablecoin or at least the US reserve stablecoin. But check this out.
Turning to digital assets, something that we've talked about quite a bit in the time remaining, can you tell me your assessment of how the regulatory process is coming for the implementation of the Genius Act?
The Genius Act was an important act, important piece of legislation for bringing back into the U.S. the regulation, creation of digital assets, and making the United States a national champion. The Genius Act and the stable coins that will be created with that could, in fact, be an important feature of financing the U.S. government. And we are moving with deliberate speed to round out the House and the Senate's intention on that important,
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Piece of legislation.
Appreciate your work and leadership there.
But again, when we think about what stablecoins are becoming and how they're being utilized within the US, they want to utilize this as essentially the digital form of the US dollar. This will be the digital reserve currency. But I don't believe that it's going to be just any stablecoin. I don't think that it's going to be Tether. I don't think that it's going to be Circle. And maybe I'm biased and maybe I, just think that Ripple is more embedded into the US system than we actually think. But, why wouldn't it be RLUSD? Think about all of the targeting of Ripple. Think about all of the bankers trying to fight back against Ripple. Like it was never, banks against Tether or Circle. It was always against Ripple. And again, if that doesn't make you question or think about where we're headed here and how big of a piece of the system Ripple really is becoming, and even how big XRP could be, I don't know what will. But I will say this. I do think that Mark Yesko is correct. I think that there's something much bigger happening behind the scenes. We've talked about it for years as well. I mean, I think that XRP, with everything that Ripple's creating here, I mean, when you look at the Ripple stack, it's hard not to look at this and say, this is new infrastructure. And if we're thinking about how big Ripple is becoming, and we also think about the names that Ripple is tied back to, and then we also think about, all the organizations that Ripple's working with, even organizations around the U.S. banking system and the U.S. financial system, it looks as though, and maybe I'm just speculating here, it looks as though Ripple is creating a completely new financial system built on digital asset infrastructure with XRP at the core. If this is the case, we could expect some pretty big updates going forward once we have clarity, and also just in general this year. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video.